So the prompt we were given was, think back on your life to a time where you now see that God was working in your life, but maybe at the time it was going on, you couldn't figure out what was happening. And the best way I can think to describe this phenomenon, which happens to everyone, is God's plan for us is art, and God is the great artist. But it doesn't matter how great or famous the artist is. When we look at art, like how we interpret that art depends so much on our mood and on the lighting and our experience. And we can look at art by a famous artist and go, I get it. That's really clear. I understand exactly what the artist was doing. And you can look at it and go, what was that? Like, I don't get this, right? My name is Ben Glass, and my wife, Sandy, and I have raised our 9 children in this church. In fact, we did some math recently, and Sandy and I have spent more than half of our lives at Abiding Presence. But the cool thing about 9 kids, they don't all come at once. And there was a time we had 4 children and a dog. And one day, Sandy comes to me and she says, I feel that we are called to adopt. And I said, I don't get the we part because I'm not hearing that message. I was young in my legal career, 4 children and a dog with a lot of things going on. And I said, no way, we're too busy, not equipped, no. And Sandy said, okay. And God said, I'll be patient, I'll wait. And it was about 8 years between the time our number 4 was born and our number 5 was born. And in that time, I had quit my law firm job to start my own practice. We had moved into a larger house because we had more kiddos under roof. And it was shortly after our number 5 was born, Matt, Sandy comes to me and she says, I feel it again. We're being called to adopt. And I said, you don't get it. We were busy a long time ago. It's busier now. There's no room at the inn. We're not equipped. The answer is no. Sandy said, okay. God said, I'm going to send you to a concert. And through a real confluence of, you could look at this and go, a real confluence of coincidences, exactly 22 years ago, this Friday, March 8, 2002, we end up at a Steven Curtis Chapman concert held just down the road in Woodbridge. Now, mind you, at that time, Sandy and I knew nothing about the Christian music genre. We did not follow any artists. We thought it was a little bit weird that you would be singing praise and worship songs in a place that wasn't a church. And Sandy says, we have nothing else to do. How long could this be? 45 minutes. It was a 3-hour concert. And that was Friday night. On Sunday morning, I come to church, and Pastor Bailey, we have a hall named after him, Pastor Bailey's greeting us, as Pastor Meredith does every Sunday. And I said to him, Pastor, I don't know if you've ever actually felt and experienced a true God moment. I think I just had one. And I don't know where this is going to go. Where it went was 18 months later, we were in Beijing, China, adopting our first Chinese child, Kevin, who was adopted at 18 months. Several years later, got the call again. This time I'm not resisting at all. And we're back in China, our second trip to adopt Emma, who's here. Emma was 6.5 years old. And a couple of years later, it happened again. Again, I'm not resisting. And this time, there were 2 children who were drawn to us, Leah and David. Leah was 11, David was 12 at the time. And now we're really filled up, but there's like no resistance at all. Our lives had been changed. Now, mind you, at that time in China, there was a rule. You could not adopt more than 1 child at a time. The artist tells us, just ask and let's see what happens. And China said yes. And so over those next 20 years or so, bringing us through to today, I thought that the plan was, and the ask was, for Sandy and I to care for God's children. I thought God was using us to care for these children. In those 20 years, a lot of light and a lot of happiness and many challenges, frankly. What Sandy and I both believe now is that as we have stepped back, because the challenge is when we are living in the muck of life and dealing with humanity, and the problem is we're standing so close to the art that we can't see the big picture. And it takes drawing back from the art, usually over a period of time, to kind of see, okay, now I get it. Over those 20 years, what we see now very clearly, a couple of things, but one is God was using these children to change us. Sandy and I fundamentally changed our DNA, how we deal with the world, through our children. Everything we thought we knew about parenting, we had to relearn. We made friends all over the country. We talked to experts and went to conferences all over the country to learn how to communicate better. We learned how to communicate between ourselves. We learned how to communicate with the world. And now, as I step back even further, Sandy and I both believe that the plan was for us to be able to tell as many people as we possibly can about the learnings from that journey. And there's 3 big learnings that again, fundamentally changed our lives. Number 1, yes, there is evil and malice in the world, for sure. We don't deal with evil and malice here in Northern Virginia. We don't encounter it, by and large. We encounter people who irritate us, who disappoint us, who make us angry. One of the things that we've learned, the big lesson is, most of these behaviors, when someone says or does something that offends you or hurts you, and this is, we've been talking about Lent and forgiveness all Lent, is that these actions are driven by one of two very powerful emotions. They're driven by fear and they're driven by shame. And we could do a couple of days on those 2 topics alone. Or the people who make us angry or upset or disappointed, they're making simple human mistakes. So the person who's serving you behind the counter at the local coffee shop, who's maybe going too slow or doesn't get your drink right or whatever, like he or she, they didn't decide, like they didn't wake up that morning and go at 9:30, this guy's coming in, I'm going to screw up his day. They make a mistake. And so knowing that and now viewing what happens to us through that framework leads to this second point, which is this. We don't have a lot of control over things that happen to us in our lives, right? You look in the evening news, they only talk about 3 things: bad weather, bad politics, and bad wars. We have 0 control over any of that. God has given us absolute dominion, power, and control. You guys note this, because this is really important. Absolute dominion, power, and control over how we respond to the stimulus. And we believe, and I certainly believe, that most everything we know about Christian living and living as a child of God is embodied in that time, space, between the time something happens to you which is adverse, somebody says or does something, and the time that we respond to that. Like living as a child of God is about that space, and it's as simple and as complex as that. And that doesn't mean that it's easy. It's not easy at all, but we have total power over that. The other thing is who are the people that offend you, make you angry, upset you most, right? It's the people that you know. It's your loved ones, right? It's the people that you work with, the people in your neighborhood, like usually not anonymous people. Those people who offend you, you are usually going to need to have a healing conversation with them. And that healing conversation we learn through our children has to take place when neither brain is on fire. Which lays to rest that old bromide that never go to bed angry with each other. That's wrong. You can go to bed angry with each other. Because healing conversations take energy. And the new day gives both brains a time to calm down, not be on fire, so that you can have that productive, healing conversation. Now let me ask you this, because this is, I didn't realize this until I went back and looked on the internet to find Steven Curtis Chapman's tour schedule, but it was March 8, 2002. This Friday is March 8, 2004. We're seeing him Friday night. We have backstage passes, tickets to go see him. And that's either like the biggest coincidence in the world, or that's art. Last point, the most exciting thing, and I think this happens to everybody, is I think there's more to be seen. There's more drawing back from the art to be seen, and that's both scary